great to have you here. I always wanted to interview you. I love your books.
Thank you.
And I want to get in a moment to the 10,000 hours thing, which I find completely absorbing.
Yes, this
However,
might be the reason that many people know you, have heard of you, because you have this theory about it needs 10,000 hours before we become accomplished at something.
It's complicated and a little nuanced, but yes, I was one of the chief popularizers of that notion. Yeah.
Well, let's just start with that then, because the basis of it was that if you take Tiger Woods with putting or the Beatles with their early years in Hamburg, that if you put in 10,000 hours of practice, then most of the greats who people think just have a natural gift for stuff, they've normally done that at some stage, whether they're musicians or entertainers or footballers, whatever it may be. That's basically the theory, isn't it?
The idea is there's no such thing as a natural, so that even if you are someone who is born with an extraordinary talent for something, you still need to put in not a small amount of time, but a considerable amount of very determined, dedicated practice to express your talent. So all of the members of the Beatles are extraordinarily brilliant. They were born with an incredible aptitude for music. But that incubation period that they spend in Hamburg, where they are working, they are playing, 8 hours a day, month in, month out, is absolutely central for that ability to kind of...
So when they get their chance of the big move into superstardom, they're actually, technically, they're ready.
They're ready. That's the argument.
So it's not that we don't have natural gifts and we only practice things for 10,000 hours.
Oh, no, you need them both. If I practice music for 10,000 hours, I'm not Paul McCartney.
Yes.
That's never happened in a million years.
Right.
No. And that was one of the ways in which that idea was
corrupted?
Distorted.
Yeah.
It often happens when you write a book that people don't actually read it. They stop halfway through. I certainly hope people don't do that with talking.
Well, it was interesting. I mean, I interviewed recently a football player, a soccer player, as Americans would say, Cristiano Ronaldo, arguably the greatest that maybe ever played the game. And he was talking about this, actually, that he has put in over 16, 17 years, in fact, going back to when he was 10, so a much longer period of time, unbelievably dedicated to practice, as has Lionel Messi, his great rival. And he was talking about other players who had natural genius, didn't have the work ethic, and their careers didn't last anywhere near as long. He completely subscribed to that theory. And he would be what you're talking about, where the gift is there, but if you add the work ethic to the gift, you've got potential glory.
I was talking to a chess grandmaster who was ranked in the top 10 in the world, and he was telling me about his childhood. And he was, say I would play online as a teenager for sort of 6 hours, and then my mother would drive me into the city and I would play at this chess club. It's like, when did you go to school? It was, well, I didn't really go to school. I was homeschooled. But you realize from the age of sort of 8 and 9 on, he's just playing chess. And that's why, that's sort of the point, exactly the same point as
I think it's really interesting. It's a very important message for kids as well, is that if you have a natural gift, to make full potential get realised, you have to put the hours in. I mean, I can't think of anybody in anything that involves skill or talent who's ever made superstardom for a period of time that hasn't put the hours in. The work ethic has to go hand in hand with the ability. And it's a waste of a gift if you don't do it, I think. Let's turn to your new book.
Talking to Strangers.
Yeah, so what's this about? You will explain this better than we can. Explain the premise of the book.
The premise of the book is the same strategies and that we use to communicate with loved ones that have been honed over hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years of evolution, work really badly on strangers. Because we didn't evolve to deal with strangers. It's a relatively new, last couple hundred years really are the only, and the last sort of 50 years are the first time in human history where we have routinely been asked to deal with people who are profoundly different from ourselves, whose languages we don't share, whose backgrounds are different. And the argument of the book is we do a bad job at that kind of communication.
What do you mean when you say we use the skills that we use with family? We use those kind of methods of interacting with strangers as a fault?
Well, for example, if I know you, if you and I are siblings, I know what your facial expressions mean. I know that when you're angry, you don't actually you don't frown, you express it in some other way. I know when you're nervous, you hum to yourself. I know all these kinds of idiosyncrasies, and that's actually what one of the definitions of friendship is the state in which we are constantly revising and updating our understanding of someone else's.
And we might apply that then to people we don't know.
And we don't have
You
that.
don't believe, for example, in job interviews because you think they're completely misleading.
I also hate, we were talking about this the other night, about the thing I truly hate are political debates.
Well, we're having plenty of those right now.
And we're having them in America. I hate them for the same reason I hate job interviews, which is the notion that in a limited period of time, you can, 45 minutes or whatever it is, you can sit and watch someone and reach any kind of accurate and meaningful assessment of what they're like. It's ridiculous.
Because they're projecting a version of themselves
Yes.
rather than actually... You see, it's so interesting because we've just had, we're going through, as you may have noticed, general election campaign right now.
Yeah.
There was Andrew Neil is interviewing the party leaders. Last night he does an interview with Jeremy Corbyn, which there are people defending it, but common consent, it was a disaster for Jeremy Corbyn. What surprises me is that really experienced politicians haven't mastered the art of answering questions without giving certain things away. Whereas you're saying they've become too expert.
No, actually, I'm not saying they've become too expert. My problem with face-to-face encounters is simply that, when I was talking about if we were siblings, I would have a way of making sense of the way you express yourself because I have all that history.
Yeah.
And I've had a chance to update my understanding of you. We have no chance to update our understanding with a stranger. If we don't have a long history, we're forced to make sense of them based on 45 minutes of data. Or if it's someone like Jeremy Corbyn, obviously you've seen him over the years, but you didn't
So
grow
what is
up
the
with
best
man.
way to deal with this reality?
So the suggestion the other night was, in a job interview, if I gave you a choice, you can interview the candidate for an hour face-to-face, or you can spend an hour just talking to previous employers, references, friends. Which do you think would be more valuable? The second, absolutely.
Well, you see, I'm not sure I agree with you.
Oh, really?
I ran a daily newspaper for 10 years. I must have done, 1,000 face-to-face interviews. I used to back my instinct pretty well with people, actually even half an hour.
Instinct and intuition.
One-on-one. I used to get a gut feeling for people in the room, which I wouldn't have got necessarily from people who were previous employees, whatever, who might have their own vested interest in saying something about somebody.
But wait a minute. We're not saying that the face-to-face interview is useless. We're saying that the kind of information that you would gather by canvassing someone's circle of friends and previous employers would be more useful. And if you have a limited amount of time, then you have to choose the most fruitful strategy. So my suggestion for presidential debates, this works better in America where we've had debates with 20 people, right, with the Democratic candidates. I don't want the candidates. Let's have their friends stand up there and let's interview their... I mean, you can tell so much
Actually,
about
the best
someone.
friends of the candidates would be a brilliant debate.
Wouldn't that be brilliant?
It'd be brilliant.
Tell so much about someone if you literally, we ask every candidate, tell us who your four best friends
And we
are,
grill them.
and we'll grill them.
Before we let you go, you've been described as fiendishly clever, the most intelligent man in America, and so on.
I don't think
That's a heavy burden
no
to
one
carry.
has ever, no one has, except only my mother would say that. But she's in Canada. She would have said the most intelligent person in Canada, which is much easier.
You were born here, though, weren't you?
I was
born
born
Who
in
is,
Fareham
just
in
purely
Hampshire.
out of curiosity, who is the most intelligent person you've ever met?
That I've ever met? Oh my! What
The most brilliant mind.
what an interesting question.
Mine would be Stephen Hawking, so I had the pleasure of interviewing him.
Well, there are many fall in that category, but Brian Eno is as impressive a mind as I've ever.
Really?
Every time
Fascinating.
I know him a little bit, and I find him just completely brilliant.
Imagine being told you have an impressive mind by Malcolm Gladwell.
And
I
where
would
you
love
put-
that.
Where would you put the President of the United States on the spectrum of people with really impressive minds? No, I ask it seriously.
That's a loaded question. I don't suppose he cracks the top half.
Top half of the entire population of the planet, or?
I mean, there was a famous, years ago, William F. Buckley had this famous thing with, would you rather be ruled by the faculty of Harvard University or the first 100 names in the Boston phone book? And he said, the first 100 names in the Boston phone book.
There we go.
So maybe Trump is one of those names in the phone book.
That's who the voters wanted.